Along the fighting fronts of the world, from Normandy to Saipan, from the Baltic to the Adriatic, every day fighting men are wounded in action. Behind that short phrase lies a side of World War II not often headlined: the care of the sick and wounded by the medical services of the United Nations Armed Forces. In this global war, modern medical science brings help and healing to our soldiers, sailors, and airmen under vastly differing and difficult conditions of climate and terrain. In World War II, high explosives and shrapnel inflict a larger proportion of flesh wounds, bone fractures, and burns than in World War I. Yet, in spite of this, 97 out of every 100 men wounded today are saved. Front line, modern medicine's greatest asset is speed. Treatment of the wounded begins on the battlefield, where highly trained first aid teams working under fire reach wounded men and start their treatment in the golden hours, the first 6 after wounding. In the swift discovery and removal of wounded, new methods have been developed during the past 4 years. In Russia, Soviet nurses dropped by parachute onto advanced battle positions. In a single day, one of these aero nurses carried 100 men off the battlefield to the evacuation post. And in long winter campaigns, Soviet first aid crews worked with man-drawn toboggan stretchers and horse-pulled sleigh trains to bring their wounded to dressing stations and field hospitals. In islands of the South Pacific, where lines of communication are long and difficult, flying boats take the seriously wounded to base hospitals far behind frontline areas. During this war, the airplane serves as flying ambulance for the medical services on all fronts. But no matter where a wounded man may fall, the basic pattern is the same. Skilled first aid, including blood plasma, sulfur drug, and penicillin treatments, is administered before he is moved. Every forward military movement runs on its own wheels. Field ambulances, field dressing stations, surgical units, transfusion units carry out life-saving operations within the fighting zone. As the battle continues, they are set up in readiness for the arrival of the first wounded. At first, slowly, but soon faster and faster, the different sections of the medical services begin to function. The wounded come into the first aid post by every form of transport the unit can think up: by carrier, by mule, by stretcher, Wounded men receive clean dressings at the hands of their own medical officer. The first aid post acts as a buffer, which takes the first shock of battle. Canadian Army first aid posts work within 4,000 yards of the enemy lines. Ambulances ply to and fro in this forward area, under enemy fire, bringing men to the advanced dressing station. Here, at Advanced Dressing Station, all wounded are examined by highly trained doctors who decide the nature of the wound, its seriousness, and what treatment is required. Every man must feel that he is backed by the finest and most effective medical service that can be provided. Wounded men are classified into 3 groups. 3/4 of all cases are in Group 3, those that can be sent to the rear for treatment. Group 2 are urgent cases which must be operated on within a few hours. And Group 1 are collapse patients, too badly wounded to stand the journey or in danger of severe hemorrhage. The field dressing station is the main center of resuscitation in the forward area and is equipped to carry out the greatly extended life-saving technique of blood transfusion. Group 1 is treated here for severe shock before being sent farther back for operations and other treatments. To Advanced Surgical Center come men in Group 2. This case is typical of the sort of casualties which come here for treatment. In the last great war, he would have been lucky to get through. In this war, he is fully confident not only that he is going to live, but that he is going to be perfectly well again. By the plan which the medical services have built up out of the experience of the last 3 years, the patient, when he arrives at Advanced Surgical Center, has already been treated for shock, which used to be fatal to so many. His wounds have been cleanly dressed. Infection has been arrested by the use of sulfanilamide drugs. He is not exhausted by a long journey. He has come in time. The Army Medical Services will do the rest. From the forward medical units, some casualties are moved through the casualty clearing station to base hospital, where modern facilities are provided for even the most specialized type of treatment. Others are sent home for further treatment, convalescence, and rest. The transportation of wounded men is not easy. It requires more than just vehicles and space. It requires a staff of men and women trained to work swiftly, gently, and patiently, who supervise the embarkation of the wounded and look after them during the journey. This is true whether the trip is made by hospital train or by air ambulance. In the North African campaign, more than 15,000 wounded were evacuated by air, and the aero ambulance has played a major part in taking wounded from the Normandy front to base hospitals in England. But wounded troops are transported from Italy to England, from England to Canada and the United States, chiefly by hospital ships, like Canada's own Lady Nelson. Smiling and cheerful men are carried on board. They are well looked after. They're going home, a tribute to the great team of men and women who cared for them during the first, most critical days of their injury. Away from the roar and blood of battle, away from the cheers of men homeward bound, behind the frosted doors of laboratories is another team of men and women. These are the research scientists who, through patient months and years, have developed the new drugs, new instruments, new techniques which have made possible the success of medical units in the field. Through their studies of the nature of blood, blood plasma in its various forms is in general life-saving use. Malaria and tropical fever are studied, and ways are devised to check them. Through the bacteriologist's microscope, more than one miracle of healing has come to light. One of these is penicillin. Alexander Fleming, a Scots research specialist working in London, in 1928 discovered that a liquid made from a mold, similar to that which grows on stale bread, was 3 times as strong a germicide as carbolic acid. From this discovery grew the modern penicillin industry. Spores from pure cultures of the fungus are transferred to larger bottles containing a sugary solution. These bottles are placed on racks in special temperature-controlled rooms, while the mold grows on the surface of the liquid. The drug, penicillin, is obtained from the liquid upon which the mold grows, and this liquid is decanted off and collected. After a refining process, the liquid is evaporated in small glass phials and reduced to powder. The glass phials are sealed, and penicillin is ready for the battlefronts, where, dissolved in water, it is injected to combat dangerous infection from burns and wounds. New techniques for treating burns have been developed. Among them, one in which melted paraffin and Vaseline are sprayed onto the burnt area to seal it from the air. This is one answer to the injuries caused by phosphorus shells and flamethrowers. Today, an airplane flies higher and faster than its pilot's physical makeup can stand, and science must find ways of equipping the man to keep pace with his machine. In high-pressure chambers, airmen are studied to determine the effects of lack of oxygen and to find the answers to many questions, such as the formation of bubbles in the blood by different atmospheric pressures in a 700 miles per hour dive. In Army laboratories, tests are carried out at high temperatures to study the effects of tropical heat on the fighting man, making possible the adaptation of food, clothing, and medical treatment to tropical conditions. Portable X-ray apparatus has been developed for use in frontline hospitals and dressing stations. Location of shell fragments and bullets and their speedy removal is made safe and feasible in the field. New methods of setting broken and fractured bones make recovery more rapid and complete. Immersion bath treatments have brought a more speedy use back to wounded arms and legs than ever before thought possible. In this war, as in others, men receive disfiguring wounds. Yet, through the miracles of plastic surgery, terribly injured faces, hands, and legs are made like new. Experimental research has devised new ways of grafting skin, new techniques for transplanting flesh tissue from one part of the body to another. The skill and gentleness of this most recent branch of surgery is only one of the contributions of modern medicine to the work of restoring the wounded man to active health. Another is modern psychiatry's treatment of the 1 out of every 7 men injured in this war who has no mark to show for his wound, whose injury is concealed in the brain. For psychiatric cases, modern treatment is based upon understanding in dealing with the cause, plus rest, good diet, and healthful occupations. But every man who has been wounded has suffered not only in body but in mind, and getting the wounded man back to normal health is as much a mental as it is a physical problem. Treatment for convalescent wounded men emphasizes not only congenial work and hobbies, but exercises and games that are full of playful spirit. In such an atmosphere, self-pity and lack of confidence have little chance to develop. From the moment they were given first aid on the battlefield until their discharge from the rehabilitation center, our wounded men have been the patients and comrades of that other army, the men and women of the medical services, who have had ever before them the ideal of the whole man, body and mind, full health and the full life. Our wounded are in good hands.